Today we have Rohan Pavuluri, who graduated from Harvard in 2018 studying statistics. Since founding Upsolve 4 years ago, Upsolve has actually become the #1 free bankruptcy tool, helping discharge more than $280 million of debt for thousands of low-income families. I actually like going on the website and seeing like how many more people and how much more money you've discharged. In 2018, Upsolve won a New York Times a Good Tech Award, and then in 2019, they won a Fast Company's World Changing Ideas Award. And then in 2020, just a few weeks ago, they became one of Time's best inventions. So I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks so much, Mary, for having me. And you were actually a huge part in all of that success yourself. So, as much as the awards are for Upsolve, they're also for you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it was amazing working for you for 2 summers. You're a very good leader. Anyways, so the purpose of this interview is to kind of hear about behind the scenes of Upsolve, specifically as it is relevant to you being a student at Harvard. So I'd love to know, where did the idea for Upsolve come from?
Yes, of course. So, when I got to college, I thought that the only way you could make a big difference in the world was through public policy and changing a law overnight, and all of a sudden, a lot of people can have a lot better lives. But then I learned about entrepreneurship and startups and technology, and that got me really excited because consumer technology has the ability to reach a lot of people really quickly and for very low costs. And unlike public policy, technology, the barrier to entry is a lot lower. If you build something and people want it, you can get it in the hands of people's lives a lot faster and start improving their lives a lot faster. So that's what got me excited about technology, but I was also very interested in the legal system and creating a more equitable legal system. So I went to Harvard Law School. I thought I wanted to go to law school, so I went to Harvard Law School and I started asking professors about different ways I could get involved. And I came across this one professor named Jim Greiner, who was a statistics PhD, but was a professor at the law school, and he was working on this problem of people who are low income not being able to access their legal rights. And I didn't know that if you were low income, you couldn't afford a lawyer, that you basically had a different legal system than everyone else. And that made me really, really angry. And Professor Greiner was actually working on these self-help packets to empower people to solve their own legal problems. And I thought, hey, there's got to be a way to scale what we're learning with these self-help packets with technology. That's what led to Upsolve.
That's amazing. And I know that you worked on, a lot of Upsolve while you were also a student. So what was it like being a student full time while also essentially working on a startup full time? And what advice would you give to other people in that position?
Yeah, I mean, I think Harvard is the best impact incubator of any kind. The really amazing things that it gave were the opportunity to learn about technology and sort of all these pitch competitions that help people who just have ideas get their ideas off the ground. I mean, we got over $100,000 from Harvard just winning these pitch competitions, and we're so lucky because there aren't a whole lot of people out there that will trust a 20-year-old with an idea that isn't supposed to make any money. The other great thing that Harvard gave me is access to these amazing professors who are so close to government and the legal system. And ultimately the campus gave me was the ability to meld my interest in technology and startups with my passion for social change and creating a more equitable legal system and addressing the lack of social safety net in America. So that was the great thing about the school itself, and I would encourage anybody to take advantage of both the pitch competitions, but also the ability to meet other potential co-founders, and also all of the different schools, whether it's the business school, the Kennedy School, the law school. I got involved with all of them, either taking classes or meeting professors, and that was so helpful. The other great thing about Harvard was its flexibility. I took 10 independent studies when I was at Harvard. I took more independent studies than I did statistics courses, and I joked that I concentrated in Upsolve, not in statistics. I mean, the beauty of my experience was that I got to take a semester off my junior fall and still graduate on time. And then my last 2 years at Harvard, I took the megabus between Boston and New York, either every week or every other week. And was able to focus so heavily on building Upsolve in those 2 years. And without that time on campus to dedicate to my own project, it would have been hard to have gotten the traction that I did and that we did as an organization while I was in college.
Wow. It really shows how dedicated you are. And something I also love about your answer is I find that a lot of students feel that there's a conflict between being able to work on what they want and being a student. And what you really did was took advantage of the resources that you had around you and really made the whole system work for what you were trying to do, which is
Yeah, I
amazing.
mean, there's actually like a good story about that. When I was trying to figure out where to apply to college, my junior spring and my senior fall, I remember having a conversation with this kid from my high school who's a bit older than me, so he'd gone on to college and he was at Harvard, and he described Harvard as if it was a government, would be the most libertarian government. And that's what I sort of appreciated about the school, was that it was so hands off. And when I had this sort of idea and this passion, it really propelled me forward rather than stifled me. And I don't think that I would have been able to have gotten the funding that we did and had gotten that early credibility that we did and sort of the early network we did if it weren't for that advantage that we were so lucky to have.
That's amazing. So kind of going on with your Harvard college career, I know that in your junior year, you made a huge decision to renege on a big company that you said you were going to work for and instead decide to work on Upsolve full time during that summer. How did you think about making that decision and how do you look back upon that decision?
Yeah, so we were really lucky. We had just won the Harvard President's Challenge in the spring, right before my junior summer, and I I remember thinking, oh man, this is so amazing. Like, we got this funding. We're going to be able to hire an engineer. We're going to be able to build a real product. Uh, and here I am, like, about to go work for another company that I was only a little bit excited about. And I remember having a conversation with Mike Zuckerman, who was actually the president of the Harvard Law Review at the time, and he was a tutor in Lowell House. And he told me that, look, do you think that, and it was a venture capital company, to be so to be clear, so it's a venture capital company I was going to go work for, and he said, do you think that they would ever get angry at you for being in the driver's seat of a new startup and like wanting to learn from that experience? And even if it doesn't work out, can you imagine like learning more from another experience this summer? And that was a pretty compelling answer. So I actually called up the company, and to make sure that I didn't chicken out on the phone, I sent an email in advance and then called them right after, saying, hey, I'm not going to be there this summer. And to their credit, they were so kind, and they were like, we want what's support for you. And I knew it probably wouldn't have been a good fit if I had joined. So I was very lucky that I made that decision. It was one of the hardest decisions, but also most fortunate decisions of my journey so far.
So I know you talked about how you were excited to have that money so that you could hire an engineer, which means that you weren't technical to the point where you were building the product yourself at the beginning. How did you think about starting a company without having, for example, a technical co-founder from the beginning? And how did you think about hiring a really talented engineer into a social impact startup?
I think the important thing is always that the founder should be technical enough to build the first version of the product. Or at least that makes things a lot easier. And from my own background, taking CS50 and being a statistics concentrator, I was technical enough to understand how to build a prototype. And in our situation, it wasn't like we were pushing the boundaries of artificial intelligence or virtual reality. We were collecting a bunch of information from individuals in a survey form, and then we were taking that information and populating their PDF of their legal forms. So that you can do with a bunch of duct tape together existing software tools. So that was the first version of Upsolve, and that allowed us to then go to funders and say, hey, if you give us a little bit more money, we'll be able to build something that's more robust, that can reach more people. All we need to do is really hire one engineer. And that worked out. We were very lucky, helping a few dozen people just with this duct tape together product. And the first engineer we hired I mean, extremely hard. Hiring your first engineer is like one of the hardest things you have to do as an entrepreneur. And Mark ended up becoming a co-founder and CTO of Upsolve, which we're very lucky for. But the thing we did was we went to the communities where we thought somebody who had a strong technical skill set, but also a strong passion for civic tech or technology for social good would be. And fortunately, one of my TAs for a class that I took at Harvard on technology and innovation in government had interned for a summer in this community called Civic Hall, which was an incubator for civic tech projects. And Mark was a part of that incubator. So I got my TA at Harvard to send an email to this incubator and got introduced to Mark. So now that I think about it, we even have to owe Harvard for the introduction to our CTO. And that was one of the most critical people I've ever met in my entire life. So, yeah.
That's amazing. I didn't know that story, but it's funny how interconnected all of this stuff is. So Upsolve has an incredible list of backers, an incredible list of supporters. You have very impressive board members, impressive advisors. You've been funded by organizations that typically fund undergrads, for example, Y Combinator, but also organizations and foundations that don't typically fund undergrads, like the Hewlett-Packard Foundation. How did you convince all of these people to trust an undergrad and trust that you were committed to this?
Well, I think that for a lot of people, I mean, I don't think age matters as much as the traction and the vision and the energy that you bring to the work. And we were very lucky for our first funders, which were like the Harvard pitch competitions we won, which were specifically for undergrads. And then the Robin Hood Foundation and Hannah Calhoun, who ran the tech incubator out of the Robin Hood Foundation, we got to know her for several months and build that trust before she ended up making the first $50K grant to Upsolve on behalf of the Robin Hood Foundation and their investment committee. So it didn't all happen at once. I think that as we got more and more traction, we de-risked giving to Upsolve more and more. And there's still people out there who will say, oh, you are too early. And hopefully as we get more and more traction, we'll be able to convince those people. But I think that the key was that it didn't happen all at once, that there was traction. And then also we were very lucky to have just a great early board of advisors and existing funders that were willing to speak highly to our team and the problem that we were going after.
That's great. Pivoting to Upsolve's financial model, I think probably unbeknownst to a lot of people, Upsolve is actually a financially sustainable nonprofit, as in it doesn't just rely upon its amazing backers, it actually generates revenue that funds growth. What type of experimentation and what path did it take for you to get there?
Yeah, so I think it's so important for nonprofits, if they can, to figure out a way to be financially sustainable, because otherwise you have the leadership of the organization spending all of their time fundraising and not spending their time actually helping the people that they're supposed to help and that they aim to help. So that's actually oftentimes cripples nonprofits from being as effective when they fundraise to just keep fundraising. And to me, it's really important if you can get away from that to spend as much of your time as possible on the community you're trying to help, rather than asking people for donations just so you can keep asking for donations later on. And the way that we were able to do that is we did a bunch of experiments, and we figured out eventually that there were enough people coming to our website who weren't a good fit for Upsolve or wanted to talk to a lawyer before using Upsolve, and that lawyers were willing to pay us fees in order to be able to be listed on our website. So that ended up allowing us to cover a meaningful portion of our own expenses, which then allowed us to reinvest more in reaching additional low-income communities and growing at a much faster rate than a traditional nonprofit that just relies on donations. So that's been really helpful. But we still get a lot of funding from donations, and that's been really critical for our own growth too.
It's absolutely incredible that you've succeeded not only as a startup, but as a nonprofit startup, but also as like a financially sustainable nonprofit startup, and just how much imagination it took to get there, because it's an uncommon model. So I would love to know, Upsolve right now is clearly so successful, and maybe it's easy to look back and say like, it was always going to be that way. This was this was how it's going to go, but it's really unclear. So, looking back to you as a high school senior, what would you tell that person now that you've seen this whole journey?
Yes, I mean, I think it would be to be more open-minded to all of the big ways that you can make a difference in the world. I thought that like electoral politics and public policy was the only way, but now I understand, um, uh, especially after meeting technology entrepreneurs that are mission-driven and working on problems that specifically address marginalized communities, that technology innovation, entrepreneurship can be an equally viable lever to make a big difference in the world. And there's some problems that actually should be solved with technology innovation and entrepreneurship, not by public policy. And then also that there's even things that I have not had the experience with, such as community organizing and activism and advocacy, where people in those roles have more impact than people trying to solve the same problems but with software, with public policy. So to be more open-minded, and of course there's even authors who write books on issues, and that's the way to make a big difference. So to be more open-minded about the different jobs you can have to make a huge difference and positively affect change.
That's really fantastic advice. Now, what about if you were a senior in college, or there's some seniors in college out there who are thinking of maybe starting a startup or starting something in the social impact space, but feel really, really scared about it? What would you tell them?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing is that you only need to start with like a small project. I always like the word project rather than nonprofit or organization or company, because there's no such thing as a project really failing. You just do a project, you experiment with the project. So, I mean, we do projects all the time at Upsolve, and they're not that scary because we know that we'll learn something from the experience. So if you aren't sure exactly what you want to do and you take a job, just keep in mind that on your weekends or in the evenings, you can always whip up a prototype and go to Facebook groups or go on Craigslist and try to reach the communities that you're trying to serve and see if they find whatever you've built useful. And if they have, then keep going and iterate. And if they haven't, then just work on something new. But there's so many ways to, without actually taking any serious sacrifice all at once, try and make progress on solving the problems you want to solve.
That is a super thoughtful answer. I love how much time you spent into thinking about this stuff. And so my final question is, this is 2020. What is next for Upsolve, and what is next for you?
This year, I obviously the economy has gone south as a result of massive unemployment for Main Street America, and next year we expect there to be an increase in demand for what we provide in the social safety net we provide as a result of the fallout from this year. So we're going to be laser focused on addressing that immediate need. And then as our organization continues to mature and we use our platform and direct services for, we aim to use our platform direct services, we think there's a huge opportunity to advocate for a simpler, more equitable legal system and fight for a new civil right in America, which is the right to solve your own legal problem when you can't afford a lawyer. We think that there will be no way that there will have equal protection under the law until we create a simple, more accessible legal system that empowers people to solve their own legal problems when they can't afford a lawyer. And obviously, we think technology has an important role to play, and that our own model of assistance can inspire courts and other nonprofits to translate what we've done into their own institutions.
Rohan, thank you so much for your time. This was such an incredible interview. You are chock full of thoughtfulness. And it's been really, really fun watching Upsolve grow over all of these years. And as you said, there's so much more to be done. So I'm really excited to see where all of this goes.